guys, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I painted my mountain portrait using the supplies in my do-it-yourself watercolor kit for beginners. If you do not have my kit, don't worry, I'd still love for you to follow along. They just have an advantage because they have my sketch already. If you want, you can pause the video and just follow along with the watercolor techniques that I use. Actually, head to my website, the link is in my bio, and you can purchase sketches to be delivered to your door every month. Every month I have new sketches coming out, so please make sure to do that if you would love to have some. I created this so that people who don't love to draw, not really good at, but they really want to watercolor, they can just skip that step and just head right to the good stuff. So let's do it. First things first, we have to prep our water palette. So now you're going to get all of the colors that you think you need. So for the sky, I went with an orangey, yellowy, purple. So I got all of them mixed into my palette. So right here, you're seeing that I'm doing the wet on wet technique, but I put a little bit of pigment into my brush. So white wash of, looks like that orange color. And then I go in with the darker shades right here. I'm going horizontal, just wiping it across the sky, getting some darker tones at the top, kind of making sure that I stay lighter at the bottom, because that is where I'm going to be putting my yellow tones. So again, just going back and forth, kind of mixing the two colors. Got orange at the top, yellow at the bottom. I'm staying super light because I don't want to go too heavy with the colors. Okay, so I'm really happy with how that blended. So I picked up some orange paint and I just went back and forth and just blending it a little bit more so that the color was stronger at the top. Again, staying lighter with that orange at the bottom. I wanted to keep that value of color really light and airy. So I wanted to bring in some purple. I just think it gives a really good tone for a sunset sky. And then I just kind of blended it in with the orange. You can see I'm not really mixing any of the orange with that purple there. I'm just kind of letting the watercolor just do its thing. So in my palette, I mixed the orange I already had with some red, and then I've mixed it in here to get a darker orangey red tone with the sunset sky. So once I'm happy with the sunset, I go in with a paper towel, just kind of dabbing to make it look like clouds on the sky. So before you start your mountain, please make sure that it's completely dry, the sky. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of bleeding. It's just not going to look very good. You can use a hairdryer, or you can just have patience and let it dry on its own. So before you start, make sure to get your palette all ready and prep with the colors that you need. I mixed a brown together, but I also mixed blue in with it for the shading you'll see up next, and I also put gray as a side as well. So those are three different colors in my palette that I'm just going to be using to mix together. So I'm getting my first layer, I'm doing dry on wet, which basically means that I'm applying wet paint to a dry paper, and then I'm bringing in the darker shades of brown to the wet brown first layer that I have. And this just kind of gives it that faded effect, because if you let it dry and then put the layer on, it's just more defined, which I didn't want here. I wanted that kind of shaded, faded look. So you see right here, I'm bringing in the blue at the very tips and the points of the mountains. So I have a paper towel on hand at all times, and whenever I feel like the pigment's too dark, I will either dip it in water and then dip it on the rag, or I just dip it on the rag, my brush, to make sure I get some of that pigment away so it's not too dark. And that is what I'm doing here to make sure that my shading is not too dark. So still using the wet on wet technique here, I'm using darker shades of brown to kind of highlight some spots on the mountain. About to add green to the mountain, so I mixed red and green to get an army green that I really like. So to create distance from the mountain, you're going to want to make sure that you're not putting too much detail in here, which is why I'm still using the wet on wet technique. This is supposed to be in the distance, so I'm not putting much detail, otherwise it would just look really off. Trust me, I've made that mistake before. So before you move on, you want to make sure that you are highlighting the tops of the mountains. So I used a gray color. You can use what you like, but I just thought gray would look a lot better at the tops of these mountains. So for the greenery up front, I mixed green and blue, and I also pulled in a little bit of that army green that was left on the palette, and I'm just pulling it through. I'm being very abstract here. I'm not being really careful with my strokes. I kind of liked it that it was abstract. So here you want to make sure that you're being careful because the circular parts are obviously going to be your rocks, so you don't want to cover those. So just kind of take your time. I used some black and some more blue into the paint, and I'm just going around the area, just kind of putting some highlight and dimension into the grass area. So just using the water that is in the cup is a little muddy, which is what I'm fine with. I go over the mountain reflection with that color. I'm dragging some of the brown that's in my mixture, and I'm highlighting the same points that are highlighted at the top of the mountain, kind of trying to make it symmetrical and look even. I'm even adding in some blue tones into it, again, just to kind of make it look even. I'm doing some points at the bottom where the other mountain tops are. Once that mountain area has dried, I go in with the wet and wet technique, which is applying wet paint to paper, and then I'm going to paint on top of it with my bluish tones. So you can also see here I'm dragging in some gray as well. I wanted it to be kind of dark because again it's about to be nighttime with the sunset in the background. And I'm showing you the colors here that I'm mixing. It's kind of like a dark blue. I'm making sure that the edges are really dark. As I work my way down, I'm saving some space for the reflection of the sunset. So using the colors that I already had saved from the sunset above, I'm just kind of putting them over it. And you can see it's kind of getting gray, which is exactly what I wanted. I didn't want it to be too bright. And I'm just adding some of the same similar tones that would be on the sky, reflecting it onto the lake. Once the lake is dry, I go in with some shadow around the edge of the lake just to create some contrast. I'm also putting some dimension into the grass, which I use some darker greens, and then I go in with some dark blue again around the edges to create some layers and dimension with the lake. Using the same color brown of the mountains, I then start my first layer of the rocks. Should mention that pink thing is just a dryer that I got on Amazon. If you don't have one, you can use your hair dryer or just be patient, unlike me, and wait till the paint dries. So here I'm going in with some blacks and little bits of shades of gray, mixing it together. I also put some brown in there as well, just to kind of obviously just make this look more like rocks. And I'm using layers, so when one part dries, I go in again and I hit these probably 3 or 4 times with different shades of browns and grays and blacks. So as you can see, I'm leaving the top part really bright and light, and then using the already pre-sketched out lines, that's where I'm hitting it with the shadows with their darker shades of browns and blacks and grays. And there you have it. That's how I created my watercolor mountain. I'm so happy you guys were able to do this with me. If you post it, please check out the link in my bio for my Instagram. Tag me. I'd love to see it. And if you like this video and you want to follow along for more watercolor creations, then just like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.